Let's bring in our Thursday night panel. I'm pleased to say West Australian Liberal leader, old mate of mine, Basil Zempilas, and National Senator Matt Canavan. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to see you both. Now, Baz, I know Perth doesn't have the crime problem that we have on the East Coast, but what do you think? A bit of time in the military to straighten up some of the youngsters who are not doing too well?
Certainly not the stupidest idea. My family, my sister still lives in Greece and has adult family. My nephew, who's in his 40s now, but he did the 9 to 12 months that everyone was required to do over there. And everyone in Greece, I've just returned actually a short time ago, everyone in Greece considers it very beneficial. It's something that they look forward to. And it is something that they sign up to willingly. And they know that it'll be over inside a year. So it's a part of a rite of passage. I guess here there's full employment or close to full employment. Once upon a time, you joined the Navy or joined the Army to go and see the world. Lots of people are able to travel now because the costs of travelling have come down. But I think for that youth area, those kids between 16 and 24, 25 who are struggling to find their way in life, it might be hugely beneficial for them. And it is not the stupidest idea and is worthy of sensible and strong consideration. It wouldn't be forever, but it might be something that will help make a huge difference to those young kids' lives. I like it.
Well, let's see what a sensible politician thinks of it. Matt, I'm probably whistling in the wind, but, you know, how else are we going to bolster numbers in the ADF?
Well, look, I don't support conscription. I think we proudly have largely had a volunteer army in this country, including during 2 world wars. There was a limited form of conscription in World War II, but only to protect the home front. And that served us well. I don't want to load up the military with the problems of society, which are legion. Keep in mind, in terms of youth crime, look, it's a very small number of juveniles that commit the crimes. Usually the police know them by name. The solution is right in front of us. It's about locking up those kids, not trying to capture the whole of our youth in a broader scheme. Look, in terms of recruitment to the military, well, I think over there in the US we could take a leaf out of Pete Hegseth's book. I mean, they've got recruitment numbers surging because they've reinstalled pride in the military. They've marked it as a sense of duty. Whereas when you see our recruitment ads lately in Australia, it's as if joining the army is sort of a lifestyle choice where you get to party and meet friends and network and think about career opportunities. I think we'd be much better selling it to young people as saying this is something you do for your nation, something you sacrifice. It's hard, it's tough, it's difficult. But that will attract the right people and more people too to boot, as we can see from the US.
Well, you talk about national pride there, but I mean, many of the youngsters in schools are taught to not be proud of Australia. I mean, they're told that, you know, we're a nation that's been invaded and we shouldn't just fly our flag but have 3. And, I mean, the pride's gone, Matt. That's the problem.
Well, I don't... Look, that's definitely had an impact. But in terms of how many people do you want us to join the Australian military in 1 year, we only have an armed defence force of less than 100,000 people. So there are still plenty of young Australians with pride in their nation. They just need to be given the hope that joining the military will allow them to exercise and show that pride. And keep in mind too, I do think there's massive issues in our education system. That's a separate issue of how to deal with that. But I also have great faith in young Australians. You can see a new renewed flourishing occurring in traditional values, in pride in our nation, partly because, guess what? A lot of young kids tend to do the opposite of what their teachers tell them. I was one like that, and I'm proud to be breeding others that have the appropriate degree of cynicism about authority, as any good Australian should.
I think just one other thing worth considering, Price, is, you know, perhaps, and these young men, that cohort, they might not be joining the regular army per se. They might be doing a year of national service. It wouldn't be the full-blown military life for them. But what it could be is a gateway. Some of them would be exposed to it for the very first time and would say, you know what, this is something I want to do now with the rest of my life, or at least the next 10 or 15 years. And so if you consider it a bit of a gap year after you would finish school, something that lots of people were able to do or were asked to do, if you think of it in those terms, it is not the craziest idea. And as you've said, it works in other countries and it works quite successfully. So it is worthy of consideration. But it wouldn't mean necessarily a full-blown military career and those young people are off to fight in parts of the world anywhere. I think that's the differentiation.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to frame it. Let's talk about beef. This decision today, and it's great to have Matt with us. Confirmation today that Australia will now remove the ban on American beef that originates outside of the US. So it might be grazed and raised in somewhere like Canada and Mexico. We've also always had a biosecurity issue with that. The government's now just dropped this quickly in the media this morning. They say it's not a sweetener for any tariff talks. Well, I don't believe that for a second. I would ask Matt, who comes, I often see him at, the cattlemen's annual gathering in Queensland where he's wolfing down steaks every night. Is there any appetite here, Matt, for American beef?
Look, we're not going to be inundated with American beef, primarily because we have enough of it here and it's already much more expensive in the US. They've had a terrible drought in the US in recent years, so they've got a rapacious appetite for imported beef. They're not going to be exporting large amounts of it. But the concern that myself and other Nationals colleagues have about this decision is not an economic one. There's no economic threat here to the livelihoods of Australian cattle graziers. There is, however, a safety risk to all Australians, including the farming industry, because even if there's not going to be a number or amount of US beef coming in to Australia, it only takes one box. It only takes one steak to be contaminated with something like mad cow disease, and we could see tens of billions of dollars of damage to the Australian farming industry and massive impacts on everyday Australian life. I think the government's botched this announcement. Look, these decisions have always and should be based on the science, on the risks to the Australian people. It's very important to make the point that we have allowed a US beef, and that we've had some misconceptions put out there by the US administration. US beef is allowed in Australia today. It just has to prove that it is US beef. There is still mad cow diseases in Mexico, so I want to know from the government how they're going to prevent those coming in. Next week, I will be reconvening the Senate Rural Affairs Committee. I was the chair of that committee. I hope to be re-elected chair next week. If I am, I'll be pushing for us to hear from the actual departmental experts here that have made this decision, because all we've heard from is the politicians right now. I want to see the evidence and the data. That should be given to the Australian beef industry.
Let's talk to Basil about Andrew Twiggy Forrest. Now, he's had a big day today. He's had a few issues to contend with. News that Fortescue's abandoned, I think now, two of its most hyped green hydrogen projects. They're in the US. Fortescue says it's not given up on becoming a major force in renewable energy. But Donald Trump's no fan of the green energy movement, so he slashed the subsidies, and apparently that's why Woodside and Fortescue have walked away. Basil, you know Twiggy Forrest well. When you read what he says about green energy and the fact that he makes most of his income off exporting iron ore, how do you put those two things together?
It can be difficult to reconcile at times, can't it? He's clearly had an ambitious green agenda and has been very keen to push that. Yet at the same time, the bulk of the income and the bulk of his work has been in the resources industry and certainly centred around iron ore. I think partly with Andrew Forrest, it's about really pushing the envelope, being out there and seeing what might be achieved. Aim for the stars. You never know, you might get to the moon. And it's a simple way, I think, of looking at his philosophy in this space. However, there's no doubt the language today, some of those announcements, and just more generally, some of the projects that he was particularly bullish about over the last couple of years, even 12 months ago, he is not anywhere near as bullish about now. And that tells you a lot of what you need to know about the push to these types and forms of renewable energy. The take-up and the ability for it to do what we thought it might be going to do just hasn't been there. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Matt, the cost of renewables continue, to stack up. How long is the Albanese government going to continue to plough down this road? I mean, we've had offshore wind collapsing. We've had major projects cancelled. It would seem to me that we're so far down the road. I described Chris Bowen as a mad uncle last night. He just won't hear any criticism of where he's taking us. where do you think we're at with this now? I mean, net zero obviously has been a big issue this week. I think a lot of Australians are starting to query whether we ought to be going as far as we are.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're in the state right now of being hungover, if you like, hungover on the green Kool-Aid we've drunk as a nation for the last few years, and it seems like Chris Bowen and the government's solution to being hungover is to keep drinking. Just get wasted again. Just keep going, and you'll get rid of your hangover. Because they're doubling down on all of this madness. There's no indication that they've recognised they're wrong. Keep in mind, when we opened Parliament 3 years ago, the Governor-General, as the Governor-General does, addresses the Parliament. And in that speech 3 years ago, the Governor-General said that a Labor government would reduce power bills for Australian families and businesses by hundreds of dollars. That obviously didn't happen. They went up by hundreds of dollars instead. And this week, when Parliament was opened, mysteriously, that commitment had disappeared. There were no commitment to reduce power bills at all. And it looks like the Labor Party has just then given up on giving cost of relief to Australian families. So I think the Australian people are right to ask, like Ashton Kutcher famously did a few years ago, dude, where's my cheaper energy? I was promised the cheaper energy. Where is my cheaper energy, dude?
Yeah, it's very interesting
like
that was not mentioned. Well, I don't know what he looks like. He looks like a mad uncle to me. Basil and Senator Canavan.
He's probably, he might, I don't know if it's a stoner comedy or not, but it's not funny.
No, we shouldn't be laughing. Thank you both. Appreciate it very much. I'll see you shortly.